Premises history. The land at Dunningham Polo Club is subject to two other premises licences as follows. The Polo Club, granted on 7th of May 2022, and OSS Events Limited, which was granted on the 16th of March 2024. Both licences are geared towards the holding of large events and have conditions requiring event management plans to be submitted to the Council's Safety Advisory Group, known as SAG, before the event can be authorised. And you will find copies of these licences attached as appendices 4 and 5. Relevant representations. During the consultation period, the licensing authority received two relevant representations as follows. The first from Environmental Health, Richard Garnett, Senior Environmental Health Officer, and the second from Richard Kay, other person. The representation from Environmental Health details concerns that the granting of a new premises licence will adversely impact the licensing objective of prevention of public nuisance. A key concern is the observation that multiple licences are already in place and that neither the existing licences nor proposed licence have limitations on the number of days per year during which licensable activities may take place. This would represent a material potential increase for the potential of public nuisance through increased noise levels, extended periods of disturbance, and repeated disruption to nearby residents and businesses. Richard Kay's representation was considered as an other person representation. This was because the Climate Change and Natural Environment team that Richard Kay manages for East Cambridgeshire District Council are not a statutory consultee for the purposes of the Licensing Act 2003. The objection submitted is based upon Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1988, which places a duty on a council to consider the impact of its decisions on crime and disorder in its area, including behaviour adversely affecting the local environment. Due to the applicant proposing to hold the event at least partly in woodland, Richard Kay has raised concerns that the granting of the licence would result in illegal activity, such as the disturbance of bats, nesting birds and other protected species. It is also stated that to grant the licence would conflict with the Council's duty under the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006, as any licence issued would be contrary to its duty to further the conservation and enhancement of biodiversity. The representation was considered relevant as it relates to the application and the prevention of crime and disorder licensing objective. The Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 provides that the deliberate or reckless disturbance of nesting birds is a criminal offence. The RSPB states on their website that the main nesting season is between March and August, and you can find a copy of both representations at Appendix 6. Environmental Health submitted a further statement dated 8th of July 2026 and requested this be presented at committee due to Mr Garnett being unavailable to attend in person. In summary, the applicant's engagement with the SAG is detailed and it is suggested members may wish to consider adding a condition to the licence, if granted, to limit its use to one event per calendar year. And you can find a copy of the Environmental Health Statement at Appendix 7. The applicant also provided a further statement dated 8th of July 2026 in which they stated the steps they had taken to try to resolve the representation submitted by Richard Kay, which included an offer of meeting on site. A copy of the statement is attached as Appendix 8. In terms of additional information, for information purposes only, not to be considered a valid representation, Danny Hands of Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue Service commented on the application, highlighting several fire safety observations to the applicant. No objection was made, however, and a copy of this correspondence is attached as Appendix 9. Arguments and conclusions. Members are obliged to determine this application with a view to promoting the licensing objectives of the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm. In making their decision, members are also obliged to have regard to the statutory guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy. Should members depart from either, they must specify their reasons for doing so. Members must also consider the information contained with this report and the evidence submitted, both written, if submission of such information is agreed by all parties at the hearing, and orally during the hearing. The relevant statutory guidance considerations are the licensing objectives, applications for premises licences, determining applications, conditions attached to premises licences, and deregulation of certain entertainment, which can all be found in the Section 182 guidance, the extracts of which are attached at Appendix 10. And you will also find excerpts from the Statement of Licensing Policy at Appendix 11, which include representations, conditions, licensing objectives, prevention of crime disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and protection of children from harm. Members can determine the premises licence application as follows. A, to grant the premises licence subject to the conditions that are consistent with the operating schedule accompanying the application modified to such extent as members consider appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, and any mandatory conditions that must be included in the licence. B, to exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates. C, to refuse to specify a person on the licence as the designated premises supervisor, or D, to reject the application. Members are asked to note that they may not modify or impose new conditions or reject the whole or part of the application merely because they consider it desirable to do so. It must be appropriate to do so in order to promote the licensing objectives, and any such step must relate to the actual representations made. Conditions attached must be focused on matters which are within the control of the applicant, for example, the premises and its vicinity. Regulation 19A requires authorities to disregard any information given by a party or person that is not relevant to their application or representation and is not relevant to the licensing objectives. In determining the premises licence application, members must provide the reasons for their decisions and consider the responsibilities under the Human Rights Act 1998 when balancing the rights of the applicant and the rights on those who may be affected. Finally, any decision taken must be appropriate and proportionate to the objective being pursued. In particular, the following should be taken into consideration. Article 6, the right to a fair hearing. Article 8, respect for private and family life. Article 1, first protocol, peaceful enjoyment of possessions, which can include the possession of a licence. And Article 14, the right to freedom from discrimination. I can cover the additional implications assessment if you like, or we can skip that.
Is there anything of any material consideration within those that you want to bring?
No.
Thank you. Members are now able to ask questions of the officer. If you've got any questions, this is the time. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, we've got a new event management plan. Can you just briefly explain what's the difference between that and the one in our documentation?
So when this was sent through, Mr. James, the applicant, pointed out that there is, in particular, a new section at 14.4 on environmental protection and ecological management. So this is intended to cover the points that the Richard Kay's representation covered. I also understand there are a couple of other procedural changes within the EMP as well. Is that correct, Tom?
I think they're just from the SAG, so we had a SAG committee meeting and then it's just update from that.
Any other questions?
Has there been any objections for anybody local to this application at all, or in support of it?
No, the only objections we have received are from Environmental Health and Richard Kay. We haven't had any representations in support of the application.
Just one question for me at this time. You mentioned that the, let's get the title correct. Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue Service comments on the application, no objections as such, but they've raised a number of matters for consideration. Obviously, it's in the pack, we can all read it, we have read it. Is there anything in there that they've raised that couldn't be covered by imposing a condition?
There is legislation that says that on a premises licence you can't impose conditions which are going to be covered by other legislation. So for fire and safety that would be covered under their own legislation, and we cannot mandate conditions regarding fire safety on a premises licence.
So to check my understanding, we can be satisfied that as the Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue have not made any objections, there is nothing there that isn't covered by their existing legislation.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, Um, Certainly.
Alex, the application as it stands, that's for any Saturday, is it, during the year? Or is that just limited to August?
It's currently not limited to any particular Saturday.
Thank you.
Is it currently limited to not just any particular Saturday, but any times during the year, i.e. more than one event a year?
So at this point in time, the licence could be used on more than one occasion.
So potentially, if they wanted to run an event every Saturday of the year, the licence as applied for could support that.
Yes, that's the situation as it stands.
Could I just add that I did speak to Richard Garnett about this, and I did say that we were only happy to run it one day a year. We don't want it every weekend.
We're coming to that, don't worry. Don't worry, don't worry. And in fact, there's an opportune moment because it's now the opportunity for the applicant, which I presume is yourself, sir, to basically present your application. But before you do that, I'd ask you to introduce yourself and what your relationship is with TDC Group. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Thomas James. I'm one of the event organisers. TDC Group runs the event now. There's a few of us, but I'm the representative today. So Highfields was first held at Dunningham Polo Club in 2015. The application before you relates to the same managed woodland and the same event layout that we have previously used, including the 2025 event, without any proposed expansion into new areas. I've worked in the event industry for over 15 years, delivering large-scale events in woodlands, open countryside, fields and country parks across Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Suffolk and Norfolk. Throughout that time, I've worked closely with local authorities and other stakeholders to ensure events are delivered safely and responsibly while respecting the environment in which they take place. None of those events have resulted in environmental enforcement, action or wildlife offences. I take my responsibilities as an event organiser extremely seriously. Throughout this application, I've worked proactively with licensing authority and have updated my management plan to provide additional detail where appropriate. In response to the representations received, I've introduced a comprehensive environmental protection and ecological management section together with supporting management procedures. These clearly set out how the woodland environment will be protected during, after, and before, during and after the event. To be absolutely clear, this event does not involve tree felling, vegetation clearance, habitat removal or excavation within the woodland. All infrastructure is temporary, existing managed areas and access routes will be used where practicable. Contractors will receive environmental briefings and procedures are in place to protect wildlife, prevent pollution and respond appropriately should an environmental issue arise. I have also made every effort to engage directly with the objector and the local authority ecologist. I contacted the licensing team, spoke with the objector by telephone, offered a site visit and asked whether there were any reasonable mitigation measures that could be implemented. He advised that he was unable to engage, so I've instead sought to address the concerns by strengthening the event management plan and documenting the environmental controls that will be in place. My objective has always been to work collaboratively and deliver a safe, professionally managed event that promotes the licensing objectives while respecting the surrounding environment. I respectfully submit the application demonstrates that the event can continue responsibly as it has done for a number of years, and I ask the committee to grant the premises licence. Thank you.
Thank you. Members and the legal officer will now have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Councillor Wilson.
You've been running this event since 2017, 9 years. Right, that was then nearly switched on.
We first ran it in 2015, but it went into the woods in 2017 for the first time.
And have you had any complaints from people?
No.
And no problem with the environment?
No problem with the environment, no.
I'm just interested to find out how many security staff you would be employing to manage this event, and is the woodland going to be area covered by CCTV?
It wouldn't be covered by CCTV, but we use It depends on the numbers that we have at the event, but it's usually one security guard per 100 people.
You got any questions, Maggie? Maggie will answer the next question.
Sorry, thank you. You've seen some recommendations in the pack at Appendix 9 from the fire. Obviously, Alex has said we can't condition any of these. Have these been incorporated in any way in your event management plan?
Yes, they should have been incorporated after the SAG.
Okay. Could you, sorry, the other thing I wanted to ask was, you mentioned some environmental procedures. What could you elaborate on those procedures?
I don't know off the top of my head, they're in 14.4, so I don't have a copy of the event management plan with me. All contractors, staff and volunteers will be instructed that no trees or vegetation are to be removed, no wildlife habitats are to be intentionally disturbed, no waste or materials are to be deposited within the woodlands, all works to remain within the designated operational areas, contractor controls, protection of vegetation, protection of wildlife, waste management procedures, existing tracks and managed routes will be utilised wherever possible. I did some research and I work at a company called Mott MacDonald. We have ecologists, so I got one of our ecologists to write it with me.
But how will you oversee that? Will you?
We have a team briefing on site, and then the event management plan will be provided to the contractors, and they have to sign that they've adhered to it and read it.
Yeah. Okay. Do you mind if I?
Please continue.
Yeah. Sorry. What's the relationship between yourself as the applicant today and the two previous licences? Is there any relationship between you and the two previous licence holders?
As in, what do you mean by that? Sorry.
Well, there's two existing licences on the premises, and I didn't know what your relationship was to those.
So one of them is the landowner, so I think they're running wedding events, which will be completely separate from us. And the other one is for Odyssey Sound System, so they run a similar event to us. Theirs is a lot bigger than ours. I know Fraser, but there's no connection between the businesses as such.
Thank you. Just got a few questions. So you've explained the absence of a relationship between you and the landowner and the other licence holder. The events that were run in 2015, 2017 and up to 2025, under what licence was that run?
We had our own licence at the Polo Club until 2021, and then we did one event at Chippenham Park, and then we moved back to the Polo Club and we used Fraser's licence for 2024 and 2025. But we wanted to have our own standalone licence so that we could protect ourselves in any,
So it's fair to say that this same event, the Highfields event, has run previously, albeit under the other existing licences.
Yeah, and our own for the first 5-6 years,
Fine, okay. But you now wish to branch out on your own, to have your own licence on somebody else's land?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, just to protect ourselves should anything happen, so that if they were to have any issues with their licence, that would also impact us, so we just want to protect ourselves by having our own standalone licence.
Fine, and you've said that you would volunteer to limit it to one event per year going forward, and presumably would that be also voluntarily limited to the month of August?
It would be the same weekend, same day,
Yeah. No, it's just, obviously, as I think you've read in the report, is that the nesting period from March until August, obviously you're at the tail end of the nesting season, and obviously without a detailed inspection of the site, we've no idea particularly if any birds or any other animals are nesting there or habitat, living there, what have you. Obviously, the earlier into August that you start coming, the more likely that maybe you may fall foul of some nesting bird.
Yeah, we'd be happy to stick to this. I think it's the last weekend in August, the 22nd, that same weekend.
Fine, okay. Now, you say that you've had, I think, multiple meetings with the Safety Advisory Group, and you've taken into account the comments by the fire and rescue officers.
Yeah.
There's two things here. I'm looking on the reports in Appendix 9, Item 10. It talks about the use of gas cylinders, and Item 12, the use of petrol generators. Are either of those involved in running the event? Because I doubt if there's any power actually on site, is there?
No, there's not. We use diesel generators, not petrol. And gas it'd be powered by electric. The catering guys just have a 16 amp.
Right, so there will be petrol generators?
Diesel generators, not
Diesel
petrol.
generators? Yeah, okay. Fuel is, I guess, probably pretty much the
diesel's
same.
not flammable, that's the difference between those two.
So you're going to have diesel generators?
Yeah.
And you said about gas cylinders?
The catering crew, they'll have their own power supply, so they don't use gas.
So there are no gas cylinders on site, as far as you're aware? Okay. Okay, yeah, but if there aren't any, yeah. So by gas you include LPG as well?
Yeah, we don't use LPG for anything on site.
Fine, okay. No, that's all good. Thank you very much indeed. And in terms of the meeting, the meeting with the various people that will be erecting the equipment and what have you, you say that that's going to be taking the woodland areas into particular consideration, and should they come across any nesting bird, etc.
Yeah, so the event space is...
I'll finish asking the question, and that way you'll be able to answer all of it. So what I'm particularly interested in is, if you're unfortunate and find a nesting bird right where you want to, next to a stage, would that mean you'd have to move the stage?
The stage is in a clearing, so there's a natural clearing where there used to be pheasant pens and things, so it was cleared way before we were ever on site. The stage is inside that, so we're not necessarily within the trees, if that makes sense.
No, I appreciate you may not be under the tree, but you may be adjacent to it with a stage.
Yeah, we could put that as a condition, so we could move a stage away to a proposed, whatever the ecologist would kind of propose to make that safe.
So in the event of finding an animal in its natural habitat you may disturb, you would be willing to move
100%.
and adjust accordingly?
Yeah.
Fine, okay. You have another question, Councillor Wilson?
In your document, you've included the insurance item, but your insurance says up to 1,000 people, and you're planning 2,500.
That's for last year's event. We'll update that if we get the premises license, then we'll update the insurance.
So your insurance will be for 2,500?
Yeah, we'll update that, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, you also.
Yes. Do you know if there's been a survey conducted at all on the woodland to see what actual wildlife is in there, whether there's bats or badgers or what have you? And, that's all, thank you.
No, there hasn't. I did ask if that would be appropriate with the ecologist, but he wasn't able to comment.
Okay. You made me think of another question, and then instantly it slipped my mind. What was prompting that question? I'm sure it will come to me. Well, yeah.
If you say that the insurance policy was for 1,000 people, was it because we only had 1,000 last year and you're now expecting 2,500?
Yes, yeah. More numbers this year, yeah. Or hopefully, yeah.
And why is your change in expectation?
Just the event becoming more popular. I don't think we'll get up to that kind of number. I think it's probably more like 1,500, but it's better to be safe and prepared.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. You've reminded me of my question. So the licence would cover up to 2,500 people, including staff and people working there, etc. And did I read that you would be happy to have it actually limited at 2,500, because normally the licence could, without any stipulated limitation, go up to, I think, 4,999?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so if we asked for a limit of 2,500, how would you respond to that?
I think we've already agreed that's completely fine. Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody?
Thank you. Regarding the woodland area, could you explain the necessary reason why it is to include that into the site in view of all the problems occurred with it, please?
We've always hosted in the woods. It's how we've kind of branded our event, and it creates more of an atmosphere with the lights in the trees and things. It's just, yeah, it's always been in the woods, so it would be a very different event to be in an open field with just a big stage as such.
Have we all been able to ask all the questions we wish to ask? Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. You can
Thank you.
return to the public gallery, and I'll now move on to see if there are any parties here present today who wish to support the application. Seems not. The next category is any responsible authorities here, and I don't believe we have any responsible authorities present. Next, parties opposing the application, and I believe that we have representation here. So, Amy, over to you, if you would introduce yourself and then present.
Hello, my name's Amy Robinson. I'm a qualified ecologist and a full member of the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals and Chartered Environmental Professional. You may recognise me as the Council's senior ecologist, but I'm not permitted to attend in such capacity at this meeting. Therefore, you must treat me as an external party. Today, I represent Richard Cade's valid objection. He could not attend today, but again, Richard should be considered as an other person rather than an employee of the council. I shall not repeat the submitted objection. Instead, I'll focus on the implications should this application be approved. It is understood that in deciding upon applications, you are obliged to promote the licence objectives set out in law, one of which is the prevention of crime and disorder. Typically, for a licence, such crime and disorder risks would be matters of antisocial behaviour or drug use, for example. But the law does not limit your considerations to just those issues. The law requires you to consider all crime and disorder, including local environments such as wildlife crimes. More broadly, whenever the council undertakes its statutory duties, whether licensing or any other duties, it has a legal requirement under the Crime and Disorder Act and the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act to prevent harm to the natural environment and protected species. As such, you are legally obliged to consider whether in approving this, that if there is a risk of a crime likely to take place. Importantly, you do not have to prove that a crime will take place. For example, you do not have to prove that drug use will take place. You simply must determine whether there is a likelihood or reasonably possible that a crime will take place. In this instant, the applicant is proposing to install stages, bars, dancing areas, pathways, lighting, loud music in a woodland in a few days' time in the peak activity season for many protected species. Protected species such as all breeding birds, all bats and badgers, to name a few. It is illegal to intentionally harm or disturb species or their resting places. This includes scaring them away through loud music, noise, inappropriate lighting, or directly destroying their roosting areas, sets, or feeding areas. All of these actions are a criminal offence which come with imprisonment and unlimited fines per animal. In Appendix 3, in the Event Management Plan version 2, there is still no tree safety reports, no ecology reports, and the applicant has stated that no intentional harm will occur. But they still intend to create noise over 50 decibels, which are harmful to bats. In the peak bat pup season, will generate artificial lighting in an area that does not normally have any. In Appendix 14, in Section 14.4 of the appendix, it states that should any birds, bats, badger sets or other protected species be identified during the build, the affected area will be protected from works, will cease, and that the location pending appropriate advice. Appropriate advice has already been given to the applicant by the ecology team, and we've been informed that this is simply not an option. In an attempt to compromise, we have sought to restrict the licence to only the open field near to, but not within the woodland, taking place in the field only, with appropriate measures to prevent harm, would dramatically reduce the risk of harm to the point where it would be unlikely that a wildlife crime could take place. Consequently, we would have withdrawn our objections. Therefore, I respectfully ask the committee to align with the compromise which has been proposed, to make this legally compliant, or refuse the application in order to prevent crimes taking place under the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, the Protection of Badgers Act 1992, and the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulation, as well as making sure that the Council follows its legal duty to conserve and enhance biodiversity under the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amy. Members and legal officer, do you have any questions?
Is there any information on other sites the effect of a festival like this has had on the wildlife and ecology on them sites at all?
Sadly, a lot of licensing committees do not consider environmental issues when they should. It has been a legal duty since 2001 with the introduction of the Environment Act, and a lot of departments across the country have not caught on to this factor. But we do have a biodiversity duty for all considerations, which has been brought up not just in licensing but planning, even down to procurement, that all councils must consider the impact to the environment and protected species.
Councillor Wilson.
Have you any knowledge of any protected species or in these woods? I mean, have you or your colleagues actually gone and looked to see what the situation is?
Myself and my colleagues have been informed that we are not to act in the capacity for the council, and that we must act as an external party, which means that we would not have the right to go onto the woods and survey the area. But as an ecologist, at this time of the year, when they're proposing to do an event in August, when it's bats like woodlands, birds like woodlands, badgers like woodlands, there may be other species there as well, that the likelihood that there are no birds, no bats and or badgers in a woodland is, it would be a miracle.
Any other questions? Any questions?
Amy, you said appropriate advice had been given. Did the applicant come to you for advice about this particular application? Is that what you were implying when you said that? And then you said it can't be, you've given advice but it can't be implemented. Could you kind of expand on that, please?
Richard had been approached by the applicant saying, what can we do, not verbatim, but what can we do to mitigate for this? And we advised that to hold the event in the field, like Glastonbury, it's a big open field. There's not likely to be any breeding birds in this big open field, which is right next to it, where you're planning to do the car park. And the likelihood of any impacts would be greatly reduced. We were told that this was not possible because the whole point of the event is to have an event in the wood. They want the atmosphere of it being in the woods.
Now, I appreciate that you may wish to respond, but you will have an opportunity to sum up later on. So hold that thought Yeah, and it will be taken into consideration, I promise you. Just have a few questions of my own. So it's an interesting point that you raised, that obviously with the change in legislation, I think you said in 2021, and not that we're here to sit in judgment of any existing licences, which may actually include the woodland area, but as they were granted in, I think, 2022 and 2024, it's reasonable to say that the change in law in 2021 could and should have played a consideration within those decisions. Yeah. Now, one of the licences doesn't include the woodland area, and one of them does. And it's probably not unreasonable to believe that an existing licence that was used to run this event previously in the woodland area could have actually been in breach of the 2021 regulations. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, it is. And just to touch upon a comment that was made earlier, that nobody had reported such a crime, just because a crime hasn't been reported or enforced doesn't mean to say it hasn't happened. So we have a duty to ensure that it doesn't happen in the first place, and that reasonable measures are in place to prevent crimes.
Thank you, appreciate that. You've, on behalf of Richard, as an other person, you've put forward a suggestion about limiting it to outside of the woodland, i.e. in the open field area, but you've not specified how far away from the woodland it would need to be in order to therefore not... I'm thinking, if you're directly under a tree where there's a nesting bird, yes, the noise will travel upwards and you could disturb it. You could move literally outside of the tree line by a couple of feet and you're in the open field. How is that very different in terms of the impact on the wildlife?
It's recommended that it's 100 metres away at least from the woodland. If there is any badgers on site, that is the national recommendations of 100 metres away from any badger set. The noise and lighting would also then be, the lighting in particular would then also be away from the trees, which would not disturb any bat roots that will be there. The noise buffer, unfortunately, the first row of trees might be disturbed, but the rest of the woodland would be protected as part of the mitigation.
Thank you. So my understanding from what you just said is that your recommendation, or the recommendation would be that there should be an air gap, so as to speak, of 100 metres between the part of the event nearest the tree, the woodland, to ensure that there's that sort of air gap for noise mitigation. Okay. Now, in the report, it mentions that I think the RSPB say that the nesting period for birds between March and August, but obviously it's not just nesting birds that we're concerned about. There are other animals, wildlife, etc. So even moving it from that window of March to August, wouldn't necessarily, if we said, oh, well, you hold it in September because that's outside of the nesting period, but that may still, if it's in the woodland, may still affect other wildlife. Is that correct?
Yes, in particular bats. The juvenile bats will be just starting to take flight from their parents, who currently are carrying them as they're flying around. In September, they start to become more independent. The noise levels would cause them utter confusion. They would not be able to navigate, as well as it could cause them permanent harm in their own right. And that is likely to be right through to, I wrote it down, until October, which is not the ideal time for festivals to be happening.
Thank you, Amy. That's all of my questions answered perfectly well. Thank you. Okay. I'll invite a closing statement from the applicant at this stage and any other party, should they so wish to sum up their presentation. So please, you'll have, you know the light system, it'll come on, give you 10 minutes or up to, but you don't have to take that long.
Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to add that I wasn't given any advice from the ecologists. I reached out to them multiple times on how we could make this work within the woodland, and they gave me no advice and wouldn't help at all. Second point, Glastonbury does take place in woodland. There's a stage called Woodsies, which is in woods successfully. So.
Apparently I've been discretion to ask you one more question. We've heard that, my words, an air gap of 100 metres between the event and the woodland is what's recommended to avoid the potential for environmental crime. How would that impact the event, or would you agree to it?
I don't think it'd be able to take place if you were to move 100 metres away from that woodland and 100 metres away from the other woodland on the other side of the field. It wouldn't be able to take place. There'd be no land in between, I wouldn't imagine. I'd imagine that would happen to a lot of events if a 100-metre air gap was away from trees and things like that.
Unfortunately, the size of an event is not a legal consideration, though, so basically that would be a decision that would have to fall upon you. I appreciate that. Taken into consideration. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for presenting your cases very well, and they're much appreciated. I don't think there's any further questions that... Yeah, I'm minded to ask that, wanted to check that you feel that you've had adequate opportunity to present your case today.
Yes, all good, thank you.
Thank you very much for doing so. Okay, what we'll do now is we will shortly close the meeting so that we can consider our decision going forward, and within 5 working days, hopefully not that long, but up to, we will advise you of our decision. So thank you for your time today, and may I wish you a safe journey home.
Thank you.